Hey, this is the Daily Overpass. My name is Eric and I make apps. Now today I want to ask, what were you doing in 2017? Back in 2003, I read this article by Seth Godin in Fast Company website. I was a big Seth Godin fan and I still am, but he'd written this article called, I think it was called, What Did You Do in the 2000s, right? And in the beginning of the article, he says, what did you do back in the 90s when when interest rates were low, when creativity was high, when there was so much opportunity, right? And he talked about how, it was kind of like about this feeling of that you missed the boat because things used to be so much easier and you should have done something back then. But then he talked about how, what are you going to say 10 years from now, about that time, right? It was a really good article. I'll include a link to it in the description, right? Because I remember like years later somebody shared it with me again and I said, yeah, I remember reading that, right? It was really good, right? And even I can remember back in it was like 2002, like after the bubble burst in the .NET, tech bubble, right? Where, for a while, and for those guys, I know a lot of you guys are too young to remember this, but like for a while, people just went crazy with the web. People were throwing money at anything that had like a .com at the end of it. People were like investing in, and everyone was talking about, oh, you should release this new website and everything. And it was like this hysteria, very similar to what we had with apps a few years ago, where everybody was just going crazy about it, right? And I can remember in 2002 feeling like I had missed the boat. Like I should have created something like a few years before, back when everything was going. But now, basically they decided, they found out that people weren't buying as much online. All the e-commerce, while it was huge, people just weren't trusting it as much as they were. They do now. Now it's like, it's crazy, right? But it was just this feeling of I missed the boat, right? Now, with the app market, I see very much the same things. A lot of us have this feeling of I missed the boat. I should have, if I was going to do an app, I should have done it 5 years ago when it was easier to do. And I hear people talk about this a lot too, right? They talk about, back then, you just can't make money with apps anymore. You should have done it back in 2013, back in 2012, back when it was easy, right? And it was easier back then. But I want to ask, for those of you who haven't started yet, for those of you who feel like, sometimes like me, like I missed, you missed the boat. It's not even worth doing now. Oh, it's not even worth doing now. I should have done it back then. This tendency to look back rather than look in the future, right? Because I think about it, 2002, right? I'm so glad that, Zuckerberg didn't feel that way, or the Twitter guys, or there's so much has come out in webs, since 2002, back when you felt like, everything's over, right? But it was this hysteria that it was just easy money was gone, right? And this is the same with apps, right? With apps, people think, all I have to do is release this app and people will just find it. It'll just be easy. And, we'll read an article about Snapchat making billions and we'll think, oh, I could do that. And then when it's not that easy, we feel like, oh, I should have done it before. Now it's just too saturated. A lot like this article, I want to ask the question, if you look forward 10 years into the future when you're looking back to 2017, right? When you think, when your kids ask you, what were you doing in 2017, when you'll say, oh, well, the app market was so saturated, it was really hard to get apps. You put an app out, no one would download it, and you'd have to spend money on advertising, or you'd have to be in people's faces all the time, and I just wasn't that kind of guy, right? But they'll say, what were you doing back when the app market was actually pretty small, where independent indie app developers actually could make something worthwhile and have people download it? Maybe not as much as a few years ago, but it still happens, right? Where were you when machine learning was taking off? Where were you when, there were still like all these old legacy apps, and there were all these companies that were still using clipboards and paper, or they're using their old non-responsive websites, right? What were you doing when there was still so much opportunity out there, and we were just in the early days of apps and the app market? And mobile applications, right? Where were you doing back when You think about it, in 2027, we're going to be looking back at now and thinking, seeing all the opportunity that exists in front of us. It is really exciting. A lot of times I get discouraged because things take longer than they should. This is one of the things that stops me a lot. Like, and I know it's just one of these things, right? Where we'll start a project and you think, if I think it's going to take a week, it's going to take 4 weeks. If I think it's going to take a month, it's going to take, 6 months, whatever. But a lot of times, just this feeling that you're just trudging through the mud and progress is not nearly as overnight as you expect it to be, but it's still progress, right? When I think back at my apps, back when I started in 2012, if I knew how hard it would be to start getting some significant revenue on it, I may not have started, but it was just constantly pushing forward, pushing forward, pushing forward. Think about what it's going to be like in the year 2027 when we look back at now, at right now, when the app market's still reasonably small, when people are starting to, when the hysteria of apps and overnight success money and making billions floating on the stock market, when all of that hysteria has subsided and we're actually able to sit down and work and produce really good stuff, and there's still loads of people out there willing to buy it. Think about what it's going to be like when we look back at now and and get to work. Anyway, those are my thoughts for today. I'll talk to you guys tomorrow.